All set.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting for this evening. We have in attendance committee members Mike O'Brien, Alfredo Ballerin. We also have council members Joe Igo, Kelly Kimbrough, and we are joined with our phenomenal staff, John Raphael Pichardo, and I'm assuming Kashana is in for Michelle, the ever lovely Kashana Burt. We've got Danielle Gillespie. We have Nick, I believe it is the Riley part of our duo.
You would be correct.
Woohoo! We've got David Gallen, Michael Wheeler, and rounding it out, our treasurer, Darius Shahinfar. So tonight we're going to talk about, love you too. And that was my son, Andrew. Tonight we're going to be, I think we should probably start with the legislation. And then we can move on to the treasurer's report and kind of the check-in with the budget department. We really appreciate everybody being here. So I believe the first piece of business, Darius, you're probably going to want to talk about. This is resolution number 687220R, which is a resolution of the Common Council authorizing the City Treasurer's Office to enter the City of Albany into the New York Cooperative Liquid Asset Security System.
Sure. The short story is essentially that the council has to approve the institutions with which we make our investments of our capital funds and our general fund monies, that they're not being used. We invest monies in short-term, sometimes longer-term instruments to earn interest for the city. That's the short story. The longer story, this group is NICLAS, which is actually a group of municipalities in New York State. And they have kind of pulled together resources to have an investment pool. And we want to be allowed to join that investment pool should it be worthwhile for us from an interest rate standpoint to park money into this group as opposed to doing the short-term instruments that we usually do, T-bills, things like that. The advantage of this is that it is essentially it keeps us very liquid. The T-bills, the investments that we have right now, the money's tied up for anywhere from a week to a month. At least at this point, that's what we're investing in. This we can move money in and out on a daily basis. All credit goes to Nick Riley, who actually brought this to our attention about a year and a half ago. We realized that this was a possibility in New York State law, but it was not something that the city of Albany was going to be able to take on for itself. And lo and behold, within a few months, some municipalities got together and did. And Nick found them and brought them to us earlier this year. And I think it's it'd be a worthwhile endeavor for us on a bunch of different levels. But in short, this really is just a simple permission granted by the council for us to invest in this with this group.
Excellent. And we also have Nick here. I just want to note that committee member Judy Duche is here as well. Judy, we just started in on the legislation to allow the city to participate in NICLAS. Do any committee members have any questions on that?
I do.
Go ahead.
So what's the downside risk and how complicated is this?
So
It's really not,
sorry.
Go ahead.
So there's less risk, and really it follows New York State General Municipal Law Section 11. So it's not doing anything that would be considered a risk because it would be nothing different than what the treasurer's office can do. In fact, there's only benefits to it because we have daily liquidity. Over the past year and a half, Darius's team, mainly Ken and Ron, have been investing in treasury bills, and I've been looking at how their performance has been compared to New York class. And actually, there's been some periods of time where Treasury bills have outpaced New York class's return. But because of liquidity, Ken can't put a lot of money into those Treasury bills because he has to have enough liquid in order to pay bills, make payroll, things like that. Where with New York class, he can afford to potentially put more in there because he has daily liquidity. He can take more out at any day as long as he gets the information to them by 12 o'clock noon. But they don't invest in anything that we're not allowed to invest in. It's regulated, managed by professionals. So in terms of risk, I would say there's a lot less risk, and that's why we're bringing it to the council right now.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? There's actually a website too, if people are interested in looking at it. You can, I can just send it out when we're done, the link to it. Do we have any other questions on it? Oh, we've also been joined by Michelle Andre. Seeing none, could I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to move this out of committee with a positive recommendation.
And a second? Alfredo seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. It passes through committee with a positive recommendation. Next up, we're going to discuss the treasurer's reports. The quarter two, well, we were sent the 2019 financial reports and the quarter one, quarter two, 2020 financial reports from the treasurer's office. Darius, would you like to talk to us again? Fantastic.
Sure, I'd love to. I'll start with the 2019 report. The final numbers for 2019 were pretty good, actually. We had a surplus of a little over $5 million, which helped us get our fund balance up to around 14, which is very good. I would be, under normal circumstances, I'd be very pleased right now. I feel that we are really on our way to where I want us to be with our fund balance and with budgetarily. That being said, circumstances in 2020 have taken us in a little bit of a different direction, which we'll go over a little bit more going forward. The key takeaway, I think, for 2019 was that, again, these were one-time events that really added up to budget surplus. I've gone through it in the report. We can, if you want to discuss those more, we can. If you want me to go through, line by line, we can. But a very top line level, sales tax came in about $2 million higher than budgeted last year, which is good. Sales tax was going gangbusters both last year and it was going gangbusters this year in the first 2.5 months. I think in part because internet sales tax revenue has started to come in to a greater level. I wouldn't quote me on this, but from what I see, it looked like we got about $1 million in internet tax revenue in 2019. That's kind of eyeballing some figures I've seen from the controller's office. We also had insurance recoveries in the Queens sale of the property. Those were both one-time events, and it was also helpful that the utility expenses decreased last year as well. Overall, salaries were up compared to the year before, but largely within budget, with the exception, of course, as always, with overtime. One of the key takeaways, and I always, and I ask all the council members to bear in mind and to speak about often, is that without the capital city funding from the state, we still would have been in a giant hole, and that is what is keeping our books balanced the last several years, and it will going forward. Let me see here. If there's anything. I think I've covered most of the big issues. I don't know if anybody wants me to go through it further because we have the reports in front of you. Is there any other questions that people have on 2019 before I move on?
I don't think so. I think you can keep going.
Yeah, okay. So let me just pull it up here,
But
first
I'm sure you would prefer to talk about 2019.
I could keep going and going. No, overall, we did well. Even with the one-time boost, I think it was still, the budget was managed pretty well last year, overall. For the first quarter of 2020, overall, no big surprises. We were largely going on as expected until mid-March, as everyone I think knows. I think there was a bit of a hit in sales tax at the end of March. That being said, our first quarter figures for sales tax were above what it was for 2019. So that was good. It probably would have been a little bit better, but it was essentially stable. Most of the variations are in the first quarter were largely timing issues and nothing too out of the ordinary. Overtime, of course, is always the issue that's it's over budget. It was over budget in the first quarter. Certainly, many departments themselves individually were over budget. A lot of those are the over budget figures are and have proven to be over the years largely made up for by savings and vacancy savings and vacant positions, and the money that we don't expend on those salaries. It's one of the reasons why overtime is so high, or is frequently over budget. But again, it's something that I think the city is always looking into and trying to squeeze as much as possible. Let's see. Overall, one of the good things overall, I think, on the disbursement side is that if you look on the disbursement chart, a lot of the disbursements that you expect to be at about 25% for the year are already trending a little bit lower. Personal benefits 24% rather than 25%. Fringe benefits at 23%. So, and as I'll talk about in the second quarter, that trend has continued a little bit in the city of seeing some savings on the personnel side that are quite needed right now from an overall budgetary standpoint. What else? Yeah, I'll move into the second quarter then, because that's when we start to see the beginning of the effects of COVID. Fortunately, it has not been that dramatic an effect to this point. One of the benefits of being a city is that our tax revenue comes in, our property tax revenue comes in January and not September like the school district. So we have been we've had a very good property tax year to this point. I would note actually that the installment plan that we started in our office that the council approved last year, we had about 1,050 or so property taxpayers take advantage of it. And a large majority of those actually paid the second installment over the course, mostly in July, but over the course of the past several months. It has actually, we're almost at budget already with interest on property taxes. I think that's a side benefit of that. And we already kind of pretty close to ahead, I would say, of where we have been in the past on property tax collections at this point. So that's good. That being said, the effect of COVID was certainly seen on the sales tax side. We saw our first big hit. It was a $2 million drop from last year's figures in 2019 for the quarter. And we are at 44% of budget at this point year to date. Normally we'd like to be at least 49 to 50%, and past years it's been actually a little bit higher because sales tax has been overperforming budget. We expect that to continue to a certain extent. We just not are really quite sure at this point. The deep dive that I did into sales tax showed a really steep decline in April. It came back up a little bit in May, came back up a little bit more in June, but not yet to where it was last year. So the trend is up for sales tax, which is good, but we're still really just don't know how much of an effect it's going to be going forward. That being said, the loss in revenue on sales tax, which is likely not to be recouped really in the future, was offset to a certain extent by savings on the personnel side. So that is good.
Could you say that again, Darius?
The loss in revenue on the sales tax side was
Yeah.
largely made up for in the quarter by savings on the personnel side, salaries and benefits that were not expended.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, actually, much more than that, right? I mean, we're at $3.5 million in savings compared to where we would be if we were exactly at the halfway point with personnel.
A little bit more. Yes. Yeah, but that doesn't also, there's also losses in revenue on other smaller items as well. So, but the savings on the personnel side are definitely very helpful at this point. A lot of that is due, I think, to the hiring freeze that we had for the last several months. Overall, what we're working on right now, we're preparing to do short-term borrowing if necessary. At this point, we're looking at the end of September. It's more a timing issue of when state payments are coming in. We're trying to work with the state right now to get in at least some of the capital city funding. If that happens, we would not have to do borrowing in the next 2 or 3 months. And then we'll have to reevaluate once November and December come around. The other thing that we're still, the jury is still out on, and the lack of clarity from Washington has been really frustrating, because local municipalities are in the same boat all across the country. But we still don't know if we're going to receive all the capital city funding. The governor was speaking about a 20% reduction in that, as well as AIM and other items. So if that comes, then we're really chopping away at our revenue side, and we don't know the extent yet at this point to how much we'll be able to save on the expense side. Although we've been doing the best we can to cut back on expenses. So we're going forward. We're hopeful that the state is going to be able to at least meet, certainly no worse than a 20% cut in state funding that's still owed to the city. We are expecting our pilot revenue from the 19A from the Empire State Plaza in full, but again, it's up in the air to a certain extent.
Darius, on that point, isn't that in a different area than state aid, because that's
Yes.
illegally obligated to
Yes.
do the 19A?
It is. I don't know that that's necessarily going to mean anything, but we're budgeting for it fully. Yeah.
I mean, in theory, we could sue them over that and they'd have to pay it. I mean,
in theory, yes. I'm more concerned about capital city funding because the language in the enabling legislation is the technical term is mushy.
Yeah.
And as well as AIM, which is also not quite set in stone.
Right. Yes.
So, any other issues or anything that people want to discuss or?
So Darius, did you issue a revised second quarter report as a result of the questions I raised?
You know what? I don't think I have yet. We've been in waste collection fee bill hell for the last few months, last few weeks. So no, I don't think I have, but yeah, believe you me. Actually, I should, I do want to make everybody aware of one thing, is that we had a glitch with the waste collection fee bills where several hundred were sent to old addresses. And while we've identified the issue, we have not identified how it happened yet. It's just something I want to make people aware of if you hear about it. It's not a big deal per se, but it is it's very time consuming and labor intensive to make the corrections and get them out to people. What we have been doing it.
And just the people that were impacted by that, do they get some leeway with deadlines?
Yeah, it's early in the process, but yeah, we certainly will be doing that. We're going to have to make a judgment over the next several weeks as to whether or not this is something that we're going to be able to roll over into taxes into 2021. We're still having issues with 2019, getting those bills into the hands of the correct people for a whole host of reasons. I think once it went to single family households, there's so many issues with the correct addresses and correct information that we get in order to generate a bill to send out. And so we still have, hundreds of people who claim to us right now that they didn't get their bill, and there may have been a problem with the address because the assessor's office included the person's old address when they bought the house, and they now live in 208 Lenox, but they came from 63 Marsdale, and the address on file we have is 63 Marsdale, not 208 Lenox. And that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those things that we've been working on to fix over the last year. But having the New World system pull old addresses that we had fixed that are not fixed on the bill now, we have to go back in and fix the bills on the waste collection fee bill side. And it's extremely time consuming. So that was my long explanation of Judy's question. Well, I don't believe I have, but I will.
Now Mike O'Brien had his hand up. Oh, well, Mike.
Actually, I was, okay.
Mike can go next.
Yeah, maybe it's more question for, both Darius and Mike Wheeler. I'm looking at the slide that has the projected 2020 shortfall at $16,880,000. And I'm assuming that there will be that unlike 2019, there won't be any cash reserves that we can subtract from that, right? So that almost $17 million shortfall for 2020 is not going to be offset by anything, right?
Well, it is going to be significantly offset.
We lost you, Mike.
Oh, he's frozen.
Between right now, we have about 8 million. We have 8 million slated between those two, but we'll have to. But we do have an available fund balance of 14 million right now, so we'll have to look at all of our reserves in the context of balancing the budget.
Judy, I'm sorry. Did you want to follow up with Darius on the trash fee? You're still muted. I think you said no, but we're still not, you're still on mute.
Well, I think what Judy had sent us a question on was on the expense of the incurred debt on the streetlights. And my report had 2.8.
So my question had nothing to do with the trash fee, except for Darius. My heart bleeds for him and his staff. We've had a couple conversations online and whatever about the Herculean effort that they've had to go through, and I appreciate the nuts and bolts of that being, as he said, hell. Was it
hell?
Tragedy hell. Tragedy hell. Nightmare. Whatever. Yeah. But my question was about whether he had issued a revised report. And the reason why I was asking that is because I have printed out the old report, and since I didn't see the date changed in what Michelle sent, I didn't print that out and I didn't do a comparison. So in the second quarter report, there was personnel services, non-personnel services includes a $2.8 million expense for streetlight bonding, and I noted that I was never told it was going to be $2.8 million. We were never told it was, and it isn't.
It was 2.2, but that was just in the text, not in the spread, not in the figures.
Okay, so that doesn't change the bottom line in what we're
Right.
looking at in non-personnel services being at 54%, except for noting that because we paid, but it does the 54% currently include the second payment on the streetlight bonding? Because Darius had said we were at $1.7 million on the first quarter, but we actually, as of the end of the second quarter, had not actually made the second payment on the streetlight bonds. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I was asking if, I had recommended that he revise this report, and I told him I wasn't going to talk to anybody else about it until he revised it, but since we're going over this.
Yeah, once we, after the meeting, I'll make those changes. I think we made all our payments. If I recall correctly, we made all the payments for the street light and in the second quarter. There is another payment, I believe, on the overall on the debt late in December. But I think that's just on some older issues.
So part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is when we look at on page 4 of your report, the personal benefits and total benefits, being at 47 and 48%.
Yes.
So that I want to say is good news. And again, if you were to take the total budget, divide it in half, and compare it to what we have, we're at about $3.5 million in savings on the personnel side. The trick is on the non-personnel side, we're at 54%, which means we're over, but because some of that can be the timing of our payments on some of these things, I'm wondering if you have any sense as to whether we're running, generally, whether we're running over budget, really, in terms of that's
no, I'm not concerned about that. That'll even out over the course of the year, if not come lower. We had more debt service in the beginning, in the second quarter than we have had in the past.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my question.
Got it. Finally.
Not the treasury. I do have another question when you mentioned the potential need for borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about in our, how do we deal with COVID, and all the uncertainty of that, and the state aid and stuff, we are talking about doing a transfer from the fund balance, and I'm wondering why we wouldn't use the fund balance as opposed to running up interest and borrowing.
We may, but the issue for us is always it's the cash flow. Now is a time where it kind of dips because our expenses are not offset by a huge influx of revenue the way it is in October, more so November and December, when the final big chunks of our budget come through. So no, we're going to try and use, we don't want to go out to borrow. That's really not what we want to do. So we're trying to do everything we can not to do that, but I just don't want to let everybody know that that is a possibility for where we're going right now. It's not, again, it's not what we ever want to do, in part because it's the one thing that would really put a reverse on our fiscal stress score, and also in the markets as well. So we're doing everything we can not to. including, if the available cash on hand is enough, just because we call it a fund balance and we call it, a rainy day fund, what have you. It's not, that's for accounting purposes, not actually pots of money purposes. The pot of money is there in the general fund. Certain amounts of it are, at the end of the year going to or called fund balance. But during the year, it's all cash from the same pot. So, having the cash on hand is the issue, not necessarily where it's coming from. But yes, I think one of the discussions that we're going to have with budget and the administration is the extent to which it's appropriate to utilize that fund balance for this year and for budgeting for next year.
I want to note that at JR's recommendation, I sat in on a webinar for on the sales tax.
I think I was on that one as well.
So, and I think what they said, when looking at sales tax for all of the municipalities, they used Albany County as an example, and they saw a big dip, as you noted. But actually, I think for June, they reported it was only a reduction of 0.03%.
I think that figure was overall in the region, not just Albany County. I think Albany County's figure was 15% off from the year before.
I'm talking about just for June. So
yeah, so am I. Yeah, I can go back
so
and look.
you think we're down 15% on sales tax?
I think Albany County. I think I'm going from memory here from what I saw. Overall, the Albany region, which includes Columbia, Rensselaer, Saratoga, all these other counties, is down by 0.3%. That figure that you're talking about. When you broke it out county by county, it was quite a different story. Rensselaer County actually has shot up in sales tax revenue, as I believe has Saratoga and I think Columbia County. Albany, which shot down in April, came back up a little bit in May, and then I think it was only at about a 15% delta from June of 2019.
Okay, that definitely is different than what my understanding of what they were telling us. So you're going on. You're going on. Current data. Do we have any indication from July and through this point in August where we are?
No, I don't have any indication yet. I can probably hunt it down, or if you want to try and hunt that webinar, I think actually provided some good resources of where to go. So I think you can probably take the time to do that.
And I meant to.
Yeah.
All the time I have. But
that webinar is where I got the information that I'm pulling out of my head right now. So you can go back and we can see who's right and who's wrong.
And it was an interesting webinar, and Owusu has commented we should be looking at sales tax and how things are divvied up, and we do have a good deal of control there as a city within the county.
Yeah. I think, we've taken a look at it a little bit here. The issue right now is that Albany is one of the few counties in the state where the sales tax is not divvied up 50-50 between the county and the component municipalities. It's 60% to the county, 40% to the municipalities. In my discussions with the county executive, he likes it that way. I will say that another option for us is to actually do what I think Schenectady does, which is essentially take all of the city's sales tax for ourselves. So basically, we would opt out of that sharing system and just take it all for ourselves. So I'm not sure that the economics of that work as well for the city as one might think. But I think the COVID change in the retail situation, hitting Cross Gates and Colony Center and other places as well, might make it worth revisiting down the road.
And us getting the benefit of the internet sales tax.
Yeah,
well.
one of the things I've been trying to get a handle on, and Jeff Neal at the county, who loves this stuff, we're trying to figure out if we can actually quantify that and see, if we can actually get some sort of share of Albany, or whatever it is, centered internet sales tax. I believe, I'm not 100% positive, that the sales tax is collected by the state and then just kind of divvied up however the state does with the counties, and then it flows its way down to us. I don't know if they can go any deeper than that to make that kind of segregation of funds that way. So
Darius,
when I went to a NICOM conference, and Jenny was there and a few other people, they also talked about how essentially if we were to go it on our own, that has somewhat of a preemptive effect. So there's a certain amount of, I think, political pressure that can be brought to bear, and it may be, it was one of those things like, well, this sounds really interesting, but I wasn't absorbing it all. Talking to NICOM about what power the city has, not only just to go it on its own, but then the impact on other municipalities in the county. If we were to do that, we might be able to negotiate a bigger cut for ourselves on that basis. So McCoy might like it the way it is, and he may be waiting for us to figure out that we actually
I would say
more.
a very interesting thing is going to happen. It's already started happening, and it's going to happen more next year. And that's where the retail industry, the malls in specific, but all the other stores, are going to start grieving their assessments, because the loss in sales revenue there are going to adversely impact their values, which is going to severely hit the budgets of the town of Guilderland, the town of Colony in particular. In the city of Albany, what I'm concerned with is the office space downtown. Things I think are changing perhaps permanently, and that is really going to devalue the office space downtown. But it may offer opportunities to repurpose, as a lot of the offices have done already, into residential. But yeah, these are massive traumatic changes are on the horizon, especially if we don't get the COVID under control.
So this seems like a good time to kind of segue into any other updates. David and Mike and Nick are here to kind of talk about if there's any questions. I don't think there's any new news on where we are fiscally, but I know that because of the county saying that it was going to do a buyout, I've gotten quite a few questions about if the city of Albany was going to do a buyout, and I said, well, I'll ask tonight because we have a meeting. So if are we considering any pieces like that, or and in terms of, it sounds like cash flow, again, it sounds like a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, that's unfortunately where we're at, especially at the federal level. Still a lot of unknowns, probably at least another 10 days before we get any update from Congress. But in terms of your original question about the buyout, I mean, we're looking at every option, potentially available to us. That is something we're looking at, running the numbers on to see if it's something that would help us. We have been actively reviewing an increase to our health insurance buyout to potentially create a savings there, by encouraging people to go on either spouses or another family member's health insurance to save us some money. So we are looking at that, where that review is much further down the road than the latest proposal that the county put forward. But we're willing to look at anything and everything to see if it's an option that can save us money and avoid laying people off. So, we're hopeful that we'll have more information in the coming days as to whether that's something that we think is feasible on our end.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Go ahead, Judy.
So I just want to note that Councilmember Robinson has a couple times mentioned streetlight savings and where are we with that project. And I've noted that Darius does include information in the quarterly reports. But it does strike me as we're about the point that we would have expected the project to be winding up, and in terms of the installation and the conversion to LED. I just want to note, I think that would be something, I'm not expecting you guys to know answers right now, but to provide us with an overall report with regard to what has been expended, what has been encumbered, how far are we along in this process with regard to the conversion of LED, and then what we are seeing with regard to cost savings, both on the capital side and the utility expense side. So I noticed that Councilman Robinson was not on, so I thought I would raise that because it keeps on popping up, and I think it's an additional piece of information that we should have as we're looking at things. Of course, the hope is that we've saved more money than we projected that we were going to save on that, but I think we.
Mike, you have the figures in front of you?
Actually, I had to relocate because I was losing connection. But what I can tell you is that in 2018, we spent over $4 million on the street lighting on that budget line. So far to date, we're at 18,000. So we have seen a significant decrease in the cost of street lighting. Certainly. So that projection of that 1 to 1.5 million seems to be pretty much spot on to this point. But we can put a report together for you to show that more vividly. And as far as where we are with the project, I actually did have a meeting with NYPA and Chris Spencer yesterday, and they are about 80% complete. So we are expecting for them to send us the first wave of invoices. We haven't made any payments to NYPA as of yet, but they're pulling those numbers together and will be forwarding us the invoices shortly, so we can forward those on to you as we get them.
Did you say 80% or 88?
I think they said 80%. They still had like the decorative lighting to do. They were slowed down by COVID some, so they are a little behind schedule, but they said 80%. Pretty much all the normal street lights are done. They're just focusing on all the decorative lighting now.
Yeah,
So was it around September or October that we expected it to be done? Am I right about that?
The original goal was to have this done in a year, and we lost at least 2 months because of COVID, because the street light contractor was not considered an essential service. So for if I remember correctly, half of March, all of April, and I'm pretty sure most of May, the contractors couldn't do anything because the state wouldn't allow them to do so. And we made some appeals to the to ESD, the Empire State Development, but alas, they were never considered an essential service. So we lost a good 2 months. So we're definitely behind our goal, but now that they're working on the decoratives, they just take longer, but they're the last wave here.
It's unusual for a project of this size to be done exactly on time. So, being where they're at. I think we all look forward to it being all done, but that's, and certainly I understand those challenges of it. So I appreciate.
It's very frustrating because we were ahead of schedule. We would get a bi-weekly update at senior staff, and most of the time they were several hundred streetlights ahead of the pace they were supposed to be, and then now they're.
So we started getting updates, which is kind of like about what's coming up in the next 2 weeks, kind of thing. But I think a lot of us have very little idea of what has been done. So, I'm wondering if there, if there is some sort of easy report that has that information also.
We can get you a total. We have just a slide where it's the total number of streetlights in the city, the number converted, the percentage, and then we can give you the map also. But as Mike said, pretty much the whole city, in terms of the Cobra headlights, those are converted. It's the decorative lights that you see on like State Street or New Scotland Ave. Those type of lights are the holdouts here. And they just take longer to convert.
So with regard to moving forward with the office situation that we're in, I know that the federal bill that the House passed not only took care of us for this year, but also for next year. That was my understanding, which was a good thing because then it would make planning for the budget easier. Mm-hmm. So when Pelosi is talking about, okay, we'll have it, I'm assuming that they still understand the need for, that they're holding firm with regard to some support, additional support for state and municipal governments. And I'd like that confirmed when they're talking about potentially having this. And if the then and she basically said, we'll deal with the rest of it in January. So we'll have it and then we'll deal with the rest of it in January, which sounds to me like, okay, we're going to help municipal and state governments deal with their crisis for this year. And then with regard to next year, that's that's part of the other half that we'll be dealing with. Do I have that right? Is that your understanding of where we are at or what's been going on?
I'd have to go back to check the context of where Speaker Pelosi said that. But I do know that just generally speaking, the bill that the House passed would provide for significantly more than what we anticipate losing in revenue. But it would also, part of the equation includes a bunch of unknowns, and then also, looking into next year. So, I mean, that was back in May when they passed that, if I remember correctly. It's all kind of blurry now, but it's been a little while. So I can go back, and if you can point me to the place where you found that quote, I'm curious of the context. So I can't say for certain whether they were saying like
it was a conversation I had with Schumer's office.
Yeah, but I just don't know if it's splitting it up this year versus next year, or if they were just saying we'll cut the whole amount in half.
Oh no, I'm just listening to the news. But with regard to my information that the Democrats were looking to take care of municipalities, it was not only for this year, but also recognizing some of the extra burdens. And so it was more than what we needed to balance the budget for this year.
Correct.
Is what, and so I'm just wondering if you guys have any information with regard to when they're looking to negotiate and reduce that, is it still essentially potentially to make us whole for 2020, and then what, you know, so this is just her in the news where she's saying, oh, we'll deal with next year, you know, the rest of it in 2020, next year. I mean, 2021.
Yeah, our understanding up front with the CARES Act was that they were, you know, as you said, they were trying to help us this year and then also looking toward next year. But obviously,
Isn't this called the HEROES Act?
or no, sorry, the HEROES Act. You're right. You're right. HEROES Act was the HUD money. The HEROES Act, yes, the HEROES Act was the one where it was money for both this year and next year for state and local governments. But obviously, the Senate isn't too fond of that. The majority leader is not too fond of that, I should say.
So at what point, the further down the line we get in 2020, without taking more action, definitive action for additional savings, at what point, when you do that, then you have to find more savings. You know, you have to impact potentially more people.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to save $1 million in 6 months, it's different than if you're looking to save $1 million in just 3 months. So at what point does the administration start making some decisions with regard to real priorities as opposed to putting off hiring? You know, I want to say, if we have to make cuts in programming, et cetera, when are you guys looking at doing that? I thought we were going to have that conversation today.
I think, I mean, we've been trying to delay to not impact individuals, and we, you know, obviously we've had that conversation since May, but you're right. I think the mayor said last night, even at a neighborhood association meeting, the city of Syracuse is going to is in the same boat, and they're looking at making cuts very, very soon, effective after Labor Day, contingent on assuming there won't be federal action. And what the mayor said last night was that we are not very far behind that, because you're right, we're getting pretty much to the point now where we've waited as long as we can, and we're running out of time. So I imagine the next time we come together, we'll be in the throes of that.
So what is the council's role with regard to providing input into that, where you make the cuts? For example, yesterday at a neighborhood association meeting, David, you said something about the mayor having said closing parks. And of course, you and I have had this issue with a lot of people being up in arms about leaf bag, pickup. Mm-hmm. I would prefer for people to be told leaf bag pickup is going to be every other week, and just have that be it. Mm-hmm. As one cost saving thing, as opposed to closing any of the parks and playgrounds. With people being forced to be at home so much of the time, having a quality of life around parks and playgrounds and recreation seems to me to be one of the best things for people's mental health, and showing that we care about our parks and playgrounds. That's, that versus leaf bag pickup, whether it's, once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks or once a month, and tell people, keep it, at the side of your house or in your garage or in your shed or whatever, until, this is going to be your day. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the questions that I think that it's important for the Common Council that is listening to residents throughout the city, that it would be good for us to have some of that dialogue with the administration about those choices.
Mhm.
And they're tough choices, and I know what I'm talking about is the tip of the iceberg potentially.
Yeah, and we're certainly open to having that dialogue. I think just to clarify from last evening, and to your point just now, the mayor's overarching point was that it's not an either or. Some people were complaining about leaf bags, and the mayor's point was essentially it's going to be leaf bags, parks, potentially waste collection. We're talking about public safety. We're talking like every aspect of city government will be impacted should we not get this federal aid. That's the same thing. That's exactly what was said at the press conference that we had a couple weeks ago with Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Tonko, where Darius spoke. We're talking about cuts to every department, every service. It's not if it was picking between leaf bags being delayed and keeping a park open, I think we all agree. Like, yes, we could miss a week of leaf bag collection and keep a park open. I think we all agree on that prioritization, but we're going down the road of all of those services and amenities being impacted. I see Darius has his hand.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate for everyone's understanding. 3/4 of city tax dollars and 3/4 of our budget is for labor, and everything that goes along with people's salary and paychecks, and another 12% or so is debt service. That doesn't leave much for cutting that isn't directly related to employment, and that's just the reality that we face.
So, but here's the thing, and I can't find the page, but in the presentation that we had, we have these budgetary savings from snow removal, and employee benefits and gasoline, and summer youth employment, some of the transfer of some of these things. Oh, so $2.3 million was hiring freeze, court, police, detail reductions. So if we've already saved $3.5 million in savings, if we have not expended $3.5 million in the first 6 months that we would have expected to for personnel costs, there is already our savings that we would expect from personnel costs. Now, I know that we had $1.6 million that was kind of an unknown, but that cuts into that significantly also. So we're looking to cover a certain amount from debt reserve transfer, a certain amount from fund balance transfer, a certain amount from activity savings that are sort of built in that we know that we can probably get to, and some of what was transferred to CARES costs, et cetera, which is all great. That's all fantastic. I'm just wondering why we are talking about anything like closing parks when we have already met the goals for cuts to salaries for all of 2020 under this COVID plan in the first 6 months.
David, before you answer that,
Yeah.
I just want to put a pin in that Alfredo has patiently had his virtual hand up. So after this, I'd like to give Alfredo an opportunity to ask a question.
Okay. Councilmember, just to touch on that, the slide I think you're referring to, number 5,
Yes, I think,
You're looking at the activity savings slide, correct?
yes, correct.
So those are projections for the whole year. That's what we anticipate saving over the year based on the update as of June 30th. So I just want to make, like, we haven't already saved, quote unquote, $6 million. We plan on saving $6 million between over the course of 2020 based on those actions. Does that make sense?
But if, yes, I get that. But if we already saved $3.5 million in personnel costs in the first 3 months, then that should come off this $6.2 million.
Where are you getting the 3.5 from personnel costs?
So that is from the second quarter report.
Yeah, from my report, David.
Oh, but okay, sorry. But Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Mike took the trends into account when he updated the June 30 PowerPoint slide to reflect what he thought was going to be the savings. Now, granted, we're not. I don't necessarily think we're comparing apples to apples here either.
There are with those personnel savings, there are larger players involved, like retiree health, retirement, some of the larger things that fluctuate drastically through, not for retirement, but certainly the retiree health. We could be down $2 million in retiree health from budget or from where we were last year, and then get significant pickups later in the year. The projections you want to use are the ones that I provided on that line by line sheet. And that left us with about 2.1 million in additional cuts that we anticipate having to be made to secure up this year. And that includes the anticipated savings from the hiring freeze and the spending freeze and some of the other budgetary cuts. Updating my forecast now through this week. And those trends seem to be holding to this point. But it's difficult to take a point in time like off of Q2 and say that's what and just take a straight, if we're down 3 million now at the half, we'll be down 6 million at the end. It doesn't work that smoothly because of the timing of various payments. So what I do is I go through everything line by line, compare it to 3-year actual history, and put a projection in from that. So the numbers that I gave you guys on that more detailed sheet are really the ones to follow, as opposed to just taking a point in time and trying to extrapolate it out that simply.
Okay. I have a revenue breakdown. I don't think I have an expense breakdown projection in detail.
The expense one is not that detailed because a big chunk of that is the overall spending freeze, which that sheet, it was more detailed than the original one. So, but that whole sheet together is about 1,600 lines of data. So, that's a different animal to try to digest. So it really, I kind of pulled it all up into larger numbers. But there is some more detail in the expense piece. For example, like the police detail and some of the other savings. But but that's kind of that bottom line number of that. We're probably looking at 2.5 million beyond the use of what we are considering using for fund balance and debt reserve and the freezes and some of the other cuts that will still need to be met to make us balance for the year.
Okay, I'm confused because I have a detailed revenue breakdown. I do not have anything other than your PowerPoint presentation for. You
don't have the expense side at all, because we did send over both the revenue and the expense piece.
Does anybody have the expense side? I'm not finding it. So I guess that would be good for us to get.
We can just resend. Yeah, we can just resend if that's easier.
Yeah, that would be great.
If that if that version you're looking at doesn't have it.
Yeah, we only have the we only have the revenue forecast. Unless is it in the PowerPoint? I don't remember seeing it.
No, it would have been sent as a separate sheet altogether.
Yeah, it was like a
I'm
separate.
not seeing it in the email from today, so.
This was a couple weeks ago.
Well,
Yeah,
What
no,
was that?
I printed that out then. I'm pretty
Well,
sure.
So if you guys could send that, that would be awesome.
yeah,
And
well,
We can.
yeah, we'll
let's let Alfredo with his quiet internet raised hand ask this question.
I appreciate that. I guess I also want some clarity on the numbers. I was looking for the old PowerPoint because the old PowerPoint, if I remember correctly, was 17.9 million, not billion, thank God, not billion. And the new one is 16.9. And if I remember correctly, the old number where we were still trying to figure out where we'd have to cut was 2.1, and now it seems like it's 1.6. So I guess my first question is, which PowerPoint should we be looking at? The one that's 17.9 or 16.9?
the 16.
You should be looking at the one that's 16.9.
17.9 was the original projection. And then when Mike did the June 30 update, he adjusted it based on the trends that he was seeing. Because keep in mind, the 17.9 number was back at the end of April, beginning of May.
So I guess that's part of what I want to get to. This is a very fluid situation. So we've saved $1 million. Well, maybe I shouldn't use the word saved. The amount we were expecting to have to find has gone down $1 million
Mhm.
the last 2 months. The amount that we still have to figure out has gone down roughly $500,000. When we talk about more difficult decisions, are you talking about the 1.6 million that still has to be discussed? Okay.
Yeah, that difference, that delta is the difficult decision component. All that stuff before it is the decisions we've already made with the spending freeze, the hiring freeze, the budget adjustments, all those other assumptions are already built in. The remaining 1.5 to 2 is the tough decision.
There's already been a lot of tough decisions that have been made. You just said a lot of tough.
The more difficult decision category.
Well, I think there was a lot of tough decisions that had to be made. That have already been made, in my opinion. So the 1.6 is what we're looking at. When we looked at using 4.5 from the fund balance, did we know we had an additional 5.1 being put back to the fund balance?
We did.
Okay.
But keep in mind, just to follow up on that, part of our fiscal stress score is a big chunk of our fiscal stress score is contingent on our contingents, our fund balance. So at that point, we were, again, several months ago, but we were hoping we weren't going to have to raid the whole fund balance to.
We still have next year to deal with too.
I know.
Right.
I know. I'm
Twice as work.
very aware that it may be even tougher. I guess my one question would be then is our fund balance actually going to be stronger? Well, it will, because if we bring in 5.1 and we took out 4.5, we're actually still a net ahead in the fund balance.
Theoretically, at this point, yes. But
And-
that doesn't account for if these projections don't come true and they get worse, then, no.
Well, I'm going to be optimistic. Optimistic here.
But
all
we're not
are.
right now.
I like your attitude,
We
Alfredo.
were at 17. We were at 17.9 2 months ago. But 16.9. I mean, that's something to be at least a little bit optimistic that we may be getting there with a little bit less pain than. Well, we've already gone through some pain, with maybe a little less pain.
Mhm.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
I agree. I agree. I think that the sales tax, because we're getting the benefit of the internet, and I don't expect another, complete shutdown, no matter how bad things are. I expect that we're going to see some more pain in the fall, but I don't think that we're going to see another $2 million hit in one quarter on that.
Supposedly people have been internet shopping like crazy too, so maybe we'll get some big bumps in that. So thanks for everybody buying sunglasses and dog beds.
This is a great segue to my daily pitch to encourage people to fill out the census, because if our population is eclipsed by a municipality like Colony, who's very, very close to us, we will see a much smaller portion of our sales tax revenue, because it is, as you all know, divided based on population.
Thank you for that, David. I also, before we part from each other, I wanted to just briefly do an overview of the budget timeline that was sent out and touch base with everyone. And I also wanted to kind of, if Judy, if you're willing, I wanted to have you check in with staff on the 5-year capital plan thing. So we can, I would like to do a meeting on it, and I'd like that meeting to be helpful. So I felt like it might be a good thing to just do a quick touching base on that. But so first, for the budget timeline, the mayor's office, Elaine has, not Eileen, Elaine. Sorry, Elaine. I love her too. She's wonderful. Has reached out to everyone to get that individual council member input, which I encourage, of course, all the members here and all the members who may be listening in the comfort of, I guess we're all in the comfort of our own home. But I think that's really important to have that individual input. I'm going to be, oh, Judy, you're on mute, but I love what, I don't know what you're saying, but I know it's good.
Are you saying Elaine has reached out to everybody?
She sent an email to everyone, yes.
I think it was.
I think I missed that. Let me go and check. All right. Thank you.
And
Yeah,
Michelle sent up a follow-up email too.
Yeah, there. I mean, it looked like everyone's emails were on there. I can certainly, I'll forward it to you, Judy.
All right. I mean, I'm disabled these days for eyesight, so I'm not spending all my time on the computer these days. So that might just be
probably a nice break for you too.
This is not a nice break, let me tell you.
I was trying to find, I'm trying to
differently
get some of
abled,
Alfredo's
Judy.
optimism.
Differently abled.
So, and that's I think that's really an important piece, to have that individual input. I'm going to be going back through the budget memo that Judy had put together last year, and kind of put that together as like a starting spot for more of an informal, it's not going to take the place of the budget memo, but to kind of have the council as a whole put in some things before the budget is finalized. And then I think that the finance committee meetings after the budget is released has been very helpful during September. Before the budget is released, we'll do a real check-in with the budget office to kind of discuss the overall view of the budget, any high-level revenue projections. They told me that they are crunching numbers to the very last minute, so they're not going to be able to give anything hard, which I understand, but I also think it might be a good idea before we, the more information we can get ahead of time and the more input we can have ahead of time, I think is a valuable thing. Mike, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you send us last year's budget intent resolution. I probably won't be able to find it, but I think it'll be very, very helpful.
Yeah, yep, I have to dig it out for myself anyway, so.
Okay.
And then would you, oh, Judy, you're still muted.
I'm just saying, Michelle can send it in a heartbeat. I've
You
always
are
relied
absolutely
heavily.
right. That's what I'm doing right now. We probably will have it before we're here. Michelle's like, I've already done it.
And by the way, it would be a lot easier for us to find it if it was in the published budget as we have required. So
Yeah.
what we have said, by the way, in the budget intent memo in that resolution is that if it's not published in the budget, then we are no longer covering the cost of printing the budget out of our budget, the Common Council budget.
Is there any way of enforcing that?
We just don't sign off on those invoices. I mean, I don't know who signs those invoices, but that would be, you know, I believe expenses require somebody within the department to sign off on it.
Probably the
So-
city clerk.
That is something that I would recommend because we've all been in a billion meetings this week that we can keep in the back of our mind. But let's do a quick update on the 5-year capital plan. Mike and Nick, Kelly, do you have something?
No, I was trying to turn my video on, not my audio.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Well, it's so nice to see your face. So Mike and Nick and David, I think it's mostly Mike and Nick, do you guys mind talking a little bit about the process? And I wanted to have a quick conversation about it before we did an overall meeting on it to make sure that there weren't any major points missing or anything like that. I did send along the link to the OSC guidelines that I have started to go through, but I have not fully gone through yet, full disclosure, but don't worry, I will by the time that meeting happens, Judy. So I just wanted to kind of kick that off, if you guys don't mind talking a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you
go
go ahead, Mike.
Nope, I was just gonna say I'm passing that off to you, so you're all good.
And I was going to say I was passing it on to Mike. No, I'm just kidding. So we had talked about it last year, and we had looked at what other municipalities were doing. And we took a lot of components that the city of Syracuse and the county of, I believe it's Monroe in New York, do for their 5-year, they call it a capital improvement program. And we're going to kind of model that template. It's not too different than the information that we give you guys already. It's just that it's all together in one place. We're not going to add it to our budget book. I think at least tentatively, our budget book is going to be in the same format. This would be a separate document because right now I'm working on department narratives for their requests for the 5-year plan. And I think it's at about 40 pages. So I don't think we would want to add that to the budget book, but we'll definitely have it be a separate document that's sent to the council. The one thing that I think that we're going above and beyond on that other cities are not doing is updating on the status of open projects. And that's been, especially with, as Dave, Darius, and Mike talk about with our situation, it's very important for us to be on top of our capital projects, know which ones we can close down, and have that money available in our debt reserve to be able to use in any situation. But I would say, I know I had talked to Mike and Dave about this as well, as we could send over some departments that we have done for their 5-year plan in the next few days, or maybe even next week, just as a template of what it's going to look like for all the departments together. But yeah, I would say it's probably going to be 60 to 80 pages all said and done. But it's going to have narrative information. It's going to have the status of their open projects and timelines for being able to close those down as well. And as I said, it models the format of the city of Syracuse's and the county of Monroe's plans.
Judy, you are, oh, there you go.
So I want to note that I'm pretty sure, I did not look at the city charter language in anticipation of this meeting, but the city charter does require those status reports. It is something the consultant commented on, and it is something, not only should there be status reports for existing projects, but also for any proposed projects in terms of, when is construction going to start, when are vehicles actually going to be purchased, et cetera. I believe the capital budget is supposed to be in the budget according to the city charter. And finally, I'll note that I've done a lot of looking at other city budgets, and there are municipal budgets and other budgets that far exceed the length of our particular budget. So I'm not quite sure why we would not include that information in our city budget to actually have an actual 5-year plan. And the other thing is the fact that we haven't had any mutual discussions with regard to what are goals and priorities, et cetera, is out of whack with the recommendations of the OSC for multi-year planning. And again, that particular report is a great guidebook for, common sense guidebook for what we should be doing for capital planning. So while I appreciate you guys are doing some, moving ahead on things, I think that there really should have been a dialogue, starting with the passage of the last budget, since this has been an issue. And I really, when you look at the OSC and when you look at other national organizations and what they recommend for capital planning, it really is about making the best use of the funds that are available to us in taxpayer dollars, and serving the public with regard to having priorities, and having priorities that are consistent with the priorities of our residents, by having the other elected officials involved in that dialogue. So, Ginny, you've said something about me. So we're going to have another discussion about the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And you said something about me touching base with staff. Are you talking about at that meeting or in advance of that meeting?
I think it can be entirely up to your time and staff's time. I think that you have a vision, which is in that report, but it's something that you're familiar with that makes a lot of sense, that I think most council members would like to go in that direction. So I think that if that's something that you guys are willing to do ahead of that meeting, then that's incredible. If not, then we'll dig in at that meeting. But I do think it's important to have a public meeting about this. I also appreciate that staff has been working on it. So Nick, thank you so much for putting the effort in, because I don't think this is an overnight thing. I think it's going to take a process, and it's going to take some time getting into it. So I definitely appreciate you, Nick, and I appreciate Mike for what you guys have done on this. But I will leave that up to you. I mean, everybody's busy, so we'll do.
Well, I'm willing if staff is willing, so I will leave it up to them to contact me if they want to meet with me about this.
We are definitely willing. I'd much rather be on the same page going into it than try to be on the same page afterwards. And so that document we were thinking would be included as part of the budget and adopted with the book. Just it was a matter of ease of reading, I guess, than trying to cram everything into one book. So we can talk about that too. But it is all intended to be part of the adopted budget.
Yeah, usually municipal budgets have sort of a whole separate section that is then devoted to the capital projects. And I want to note that part of the reason why that's part and parcel is normally your capital projects are not funded. It's not a borrowing plan. It is a capital projects plan. So you're looking at all of your assets and what needs improvements that might be funded out of the regular budget or oh, God forbid if we ever develop a capital reserve fund.
Actually, Judy, to go into that, that is included in our new plan, which when we do meet, I can show you that. Like we have it in there as cash capital. Like that will be something that we are looking at, and definitely we want to talk about capital reserve fund as well. That's also an item for discussion. So all those things that you're talking about, we're working on and are included in this capital plan.
Great, and so that is one of the reasons why the capital budget deserves to be part of the overall budget, because if you're looking at what your purchases are or your improvements are that are part of the capital budget, you need to then show those expenditures in the operating budget to the extent that you're, or I don't know what, it's not really the operating budget because there's another name for it, but the cash budget as opposed to the borrowing budget, I guess. So look forward to continuing those conversations. Did David move outside?
David has moved all through his house.
I've actually totally relocated to another house.
So I just want to note several things. Number one, somebody has an ice cream truck in their background. If you need to run out, we understand. Number two, we've got Alfredo's hand up, and then we have Mike's hand up. So Alfredo, go ahead.
As we get closer to talking about the 2020 budget, I want to bring back the inequity in pay issues that we spoke about at the last cycle of budgeting. And we said we were going to address those or put a committee together to have a conversation about it. I know it's going to be a tough budget. I know there's going to be some tough decisions that are going to need to be made, but I don't think we can ignore those issues, push it back for another year. So I'm going to challenge our leadership and our staff, our budgeting staff specifically, to hopefully bring that committee forward to have those conversations and to see how we can address some of those issues. Thank you.
That was my computer. If there's no response to that, Mike has a question.
Okay, just a quick little thing. If they take some of the glitzy pictures out of the budget, I'm sure there'll be enough room in it for a budget intent resolution and also for a more complete capital budget. And it might even make the printing costs less.
David.
I appreciate that you think that my photography is glitzy. For the pay equity committee that Councilman Ballerin brought up, we've talked with leadership about this, the last couple months. We were ready to put out an RFP, then we weren't. We waited when we thought we were going to have to make cuts, and then we were focused on hiring. So, I know we do want to have that conversation. We know that there is there are multiple conversations to be had about that. So it's not it's definitely not forgotten or lost on us.
It's just a matter of how much. Originally, we were going to do an RFP for an analysis. So either way, we haven't forgotten about that conversation, Alfredo. I just wanted to say that.
And I'd just like to add, it's more of a continuation of a conversation, not
Mhm.
having the conversation because we have spoken about it.
Right.
I do want to note that I do have Elaine's email from this afternoon. Thank you.
Hooray.
I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I get so many emails and.
Oh,
so-
yeah. No, it's hard to keep up with everything. So if there is nothing else, I would.
I move to adjourn.
Fantastic. And everybody go and enjoy your evenings off of Zoom. And